Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Clubhouse with the Nats Report. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus, today joined by my friend and co-host,
Haden Raymer.
Hayden. It's been just over a week since we last talked. I believe that was, what, early first week of June that we last did this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. A lot has happened since then.
It was like the
Um,
13th.
yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot has happened since then. It's been a good amount of time. It's been a crazy chaotic week for week plus for the Nationals. Um, but before we dive into everything with the Nationals, how have you been?
I've been alright, Jeremy. How have you been?
Been pretty good.
Okay.
Can't complain. Summer's here,
Yeah.
warm weather,
I mean, it's a
baseball's in
little bit
full swing.
more than warm, but yeah,
It's been a little more than warm.
a little bit.
But no, we do have a lot of interesting stories to cover, right? The last time we talked, there were some trends that were in the middle of being reversed. That, as far as hitting goes for the Nationals, some of these players have come out of nowhere, maybe out of nowhere, and just kind of been scorched earth. A couple guys. We'll talk about the lineup a little bit, and then some questions in the rotation. Obviously, the success of this Nats team has been based off that rotation. They've cooled off a little bit since our last show, but they've still been really, really good. We'll talk about some people maybe getting healthy, what that's going to look like when we do get there. But anyway, Hayden, where do you want to start today?
I mean, we gotta keep it with what's been good. The rotation. It's been pretty dominant. Jake Irvin and Mackenzie Gore have been more than impressive. In the first, I'm gonna call it the first half of the season, even though we're not quite at the All Star break yet. Uh, and Mitchell Parker, DJ Hers have kind of come out of nowhere. Uh, at least from like a rotation standpoint. And it's been a better year than expected there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a better year than expected in a lot of places here with the Washington Nationals, at least. We were talking at the beginning of the season, and I remember we were saying that the peak of this team is fighting for that third wild card, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of where they are right now, and that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Mhm.
But the rotation has been the powerhouse of it. We had you talk about Mackenzie Gore, Jake Urban. They were guys we expected to come in and hopefully take that next step. They have done that this season, right? And then you bring up Mitchell Parker, who's been phenomenal I mean, he's been up for what I would say is a quality amount of sample size, and I feel like we kind of know what he is, and hopefully he's kind of stepped into what Jake Irvin did last season, right? Kind of
I
being
mean,
that
he's been
solid,
better than Jake Irvin was last year.
right?
Yeah.
Being that solid guy. I mean, he's been elite in a lot of situations, and then we had the DJ Hers 13 strikeout game, right? Just out of nowhere. That was like directly after our last show. We were just talking about how he might be a bullpen arm, and then he shoves that in our face, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's it's great to see these arms, and then there's so many more in the minors that we just don't really have the time to talk about. But Josiah Gray is in the middle of rehabbing, right?
Yep.
He's been out of the bigs for about a month or two at this point. Uh, and he is making his first AAA start, a rehab start this season, I believe tonight. Uh, or at least he was scheduled to. If he comes back, right, you have a couple different options, right? Uh, right now, the way it's circuit, it seems like the obvious choice to kick out of the rotation is Patrick Corbin, right?
Mhm.
That seems like the obvious one. He's been, by all accounts, the worst pitcher in baseball for an extended period of time,
Mhm.
right? There's not a lot of shining, not a lot of silver linings, but his last couple starts have been good, and it's starting to raise a little bit of a question of what the Nats are going to do because he is that big money guy, and he's been hanging around the roster for a while. What do the Nats do when Josiah Gray comes back? Obviously, he's getting a little more complicated because Trevor Williams will come back soon as well, um, hopefully. But what's the first step in the rotation? Who's the odd man out right now?
Well, so I mean, it's if you're you see the issue is you want to reward good performances, right? And so Mitchell Parker, DJ Hers are the two guys who've kind of stepped up and performed well. They've exceeded expectations. I mean, as you said, and I mean they've been dominant for some stretch of time. But the issue is right is you also have to look at the future and protecting these arms. Now, I mean, last year, uh, Mitchell Parker threw a little over 120 innings. He's already at 77, so he should be good for most of the rest of the season, where you don't have to necessarily shut him down. If you're going to shut him down, it's probably going to be in September. Uh, but DJ Hers, he only threw. I mean, he only threw like 90 innings uh, last season, and that's not necessarily somebody who the Nats can rely upon down the stretch. Where it might make sense that, hey, send him down to AAA, where it's easier to regulate how many pitches he's throwing, how many innings he's throwing, and making sure that hey, you've been great this year. We, have faith now that you can be a major league starter, but it makes more sense to kind of stretch him out and keep him in line with the goals that he needs to, be a contributor. I mean, he's under team control now for the next 6 years, so it makes more sense maybe to option hers down, even if he's been somebody who's been a great performer for the Nats.
Right. He's been great. He's had a couple, but then you look at obviously Patrick Corbin's the name you left off the list there.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that at this point in his career, you don't really care what he's throwing, right?
Hmm.
You know, this is not a Nats team that's expecting to win games, quite honestly. You
Yeah.
know, they're good. They're good this year. They're better than they're expected to be. But, Patrick Corbin, we've talked about it. He's been by all metrics. You showed me this tweet not too long ago that he's the worst in every single pitching metric when you look at the last 5 years. But in his last couple starts, he's been good,
Yeah.
solid, you know. Uh even in the last two ones that they ended up losing, even last night he goes 7 innings, only gives up 3 runs, strikes out five. It's been the best Patrick Corbin that we've seen in a long time. I don't know if that's sustainable, quite honestly. And you talk about preserving arms. That is an interesting question. We kind of glossed over all those young arms that are in the bullpen or in the minors. Jackson Rutledge is still down there. He's getting more starts down there. Cade Cavalli is in the middle of his rehab stints right now. It's going to be really crowded for this starting five in the rotation. Is it worth keeping up a worse player in Patrick Corbin than DJ Hers when, if I'm being honest with you, I don't expect DJ Hers to be in the starting rotation next season.
I mean, he could be though. I mean, Josiah Gray, he made that All Star appearance last season, but I mean, I'm sure he'll be the first one to tell you that it wasn't quite the season that you'd want. It There was still stuff left to be desired. And then in his few starts he made this year, they weren't great. Uh, I think we can, lock in Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin, uh, and probably at this point Mitchell Parker next season. But outside of that, I mean, there's a lot of playing around, a lot of shuffling that the Nats are gonna have to do. They're gonna have to be creative to fill these innings, and I mean, with the way that the limits are, Cavalli's coming back from Tommy John, it does make a lot of sense to kind of keep Corbin around just to eat those innings. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna go out there. He's gonna throw every 5 days. I mean, that's the one thing he has done for the Nats. At least he's dependable. It's sure it's a a bad dependable, but he's been dependable to take the ball every 5 days. Which you kind of got to respect that a little bit.
Right. And I agree that that's an important role to play, especially on a rebuilding team, right? Like the Nationals are. And I don't mind keeping him up for this season if the Nats see a guy like DJ Hers being a long-term starter. But I'm just saying there's so many guys down there. It's already spring training next season. have no clue what the starting five will be. There's 7, 8, 9 guys that could be there, you know? You might have the ability to have 2 complete starting rotations, and you know, it's a wealth of riches, but
Yeah.
it's just, you know, on a rebuilding team, it's fine. But
Yeah.
where the Nats are right now, and we'll talk about, the trade deadline a little bit later on in the show and how this might get into it a little bit, but, um, you know, you're not gonna get anything for Patrick Corbin, and it's good to get young guys experience. You don't wanna rush them up, but you're not learning anything for Patrick Corbin, and I get you can't send him down, I know, but I don't know. It's one of those things that it just feels wrong to throw DJ Hurst down there after what he's been able to do in his small sample size.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a tough pill to swallow, obviously. Uh, but I mean we still have to consider that, like you said, it doesn't seem like the Nationals intend on, yeah, cool, we're gonna ride this wave as long as we can, with like this, wild card contention, which is what the Nats, they're, in contention for a third wild card spot right now. Uh, and they're gonna ride that while they can. But I mean, it makes no sense to kind of, you know, overwork an arm, where then you potentially get hurt, and they miss, all of next season if he has to get Tommy John, and most of the season after that. Uh, it's, I mean, you look at the Rays, they have an infinite amount of starters, it feels like, but they also have that risk of injury. The Nats have been pretty lucky when it comes to injuries. I mean, obviously Cavalli was the big one, uh, but prior to this season, Gray, or nobody really got hurt last year, and Gray and Williams are the only injuries they've had so far this year, which that's a blessing, to not get hurt. You're gonna have to deal with all that amount of injuries. Yeah, like I said, I just it sucks, but that's just kind of the reality that the Nats are in when you have an arm that has only thrown 90 innings last season. You can't have him go from 90 to 160, which is probably the pace that hers is at.
Yeah, no, it's tough, and I agree. It's not an easy decision, and it's made a little bit easier by the Nats not calling up all their top prospects this year, right?
Yeah,
But I don't know. It's good to see them against major leaguers, and I know you don't want to wear them out. That's a thing that the Nats have really struggled with, especially in the bullpen, recently. But I don't know. It's one of those things that it feels like Patrick Corbin should have been off this team a
yeah,
while ago.
yeah. No, I mean I agree. It's just it's, you gotta have somebody fill the innings, and if you as like a front office kind of discuss kind of what those inning limits are for players, heading into the season. Uh, you don't want to really go over that. And so, I mean, as much as it's, not, you're throwing non-competitive innings, with Corbin, at least, those innings are being filled, which is kind of like the role that he's embraced these past, what, 4 years now, since 2019. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. It's just a tough situation to be in. On the flip side of it, right? We've seen of the Nats roster, we've seen a resurgency in some bats here, right? We had a little bit of a conversation here, but in our last show, but Lane Thomas, CJ Abrams, Joey Meneses, some of these guys have really stepped up to the plate offensively and been really good. I mean, CJ Abrams this all of June, he's got 14 hits and he's got hits in 14 of 16 games. You know, he's got an OPS of over 1,000 in June. It's been great to see him rebound. Him and Lane Thomas went on that power surge at the beginning of June. Jesse Winker's been great. You know, all these bats have been good, and Joey Meneses is hitting again. We've seen his average go up like 30 points recently.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just what he does. He's going to be a contact hitter. But where do the Nats go from here offensively?
I mean, it's tough. We talk about, what, we talk about what the goal is for 2024. And I think we can kind of agree that, despite the fact that they could make a run at it, they've chosen not to. And I think that best is exemplified by the fact that James Wood wasn't on the opening day lineup or an opening day
Right.
roster, and he wasn't in it in April, wasn't in it in May, uh, and obviously got hurt. But I mean, I don't see the Nats trying to compete. And somebody like Eddie Rosario, who, I mean, if we were talking about June, he's one of the worst hitters in all of Major League Baseball in the month of June, and we know he was one of the worst hitters in all of Major League Baseball in the month of April. So two really bad months, one really great month. Uh, so maybe we're just alternating every single month. Maybe he gets a
Yeah.
hot July, flip him for like a 30 top 30 prospect, and I mean like 30 on the top 30. But hey, you got a prospect. Uh, but no, I mean it's just kind of just gotta ride it out. Uh, I really like the addition of Harold Ramirez, who they just called up uh, yesterday. Uh, he was solid with the Rays for the past couple years. Uh, I mean he's just Joey Meneses, but like slightly better. I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll
No,
take
he
that
is.
marginal upgrade.
Yeah. But no, it really the Nats don't have expectations this year. So all of this, really the Super Bowl for the Nats this season is the trade deadline, right? And what they're going to do at the trade deadline, right?
Yeah.
We talk about all these guys hitting their groove, and this is the perfect time for them to do it because their value is raising. You're not going to trade all of them, especially with it being a little more complicated because it feels like the rebuild is about to be over, coming right around the corner. You aren't going to trade everybody that is a candidate to be traded. And this is a conversation that's started to be had. There's always conversation around Kyle Finnegan. There's always conversation around Lane Thomas. If Joey keeps hitting like this, maybe we can flip him for something. I doubt it, but maybe we can flip him for something. Um,
Can I
you
quick
know,
comment on Joey?
yeah,
Joey's hitting now, which for Joey hitting this month is 250 batting average, 286 on base, and a 375 slugging. That's
that's
him
about
hitting.
what I expect out of him.
That's him
Uh,
hitting.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's a singles machine, Hayden.
Yeah. You're not getting anything for Joey. He'll be a veteran in AAA.
Yeah. But you're also you have to make those tough calls, and Jesse Winker obviously is going to get traded this deadline, right? Unless something crazy happens. Uh,
Yep.
you're gonna trade. I don't know. The rest of them are kind of up for discussion. Kyle Finnegan's a really interesting one to me. Um, I don't know if you trade him. He's 31 right now, heading into his age 32 season. He's third in the league in saves right now. He's had a really, really good last couple seasons, and they held on to him last year. Him and Hunter Harvey. What with how close this Nationals team feels, and I know nothing is ever certainty in baseball. So I never want to be like, oh, the rebuild is done when James Wood comes up, right? Because nothing's a certainty. We don't know if
Mhm.
everything's going to work out the way it's working
Oh,
this
it's gonna
season
work
when they
out.
add
Yeah.
more talent.
It's yeah.
But uh, is he a guy that they trade, or is he a guy he hold on to? Is he worth losing that potential trade, the value you're getting in a trade for a guy like Kyle Finnegan? I think he's the most interesting trade piece here for the Nats.
I don't think the Nats. I think there's a illusion in the value of Kyle Finnegan among Nats fans versus what he's actually worth. Because if you're looking by like those, your traditional metrics, right? I mean, like you said, he's what top three in saves. He has a 2.283 or a 2.23 ERA. Uh, but I mean, he walks a lot of guys. He has a lot of homers. That that ERA is kind of bolstered by a 2.18 or a 2.218 batting average of balls in play, uh, which is very very low. He's stranding an above average number of runners, where I mean all signs are pointing to that ERA going up. Uh, where could they get a solid prospect? Right? Yeah, but I think the front office and Nats fans probably want like a top 100 prospect or something around that.
Not getting
and
a top
you're
100
not
for him.
getting anywhere near that. And I that's where I think like there's some disconnect, where the Nats and Rizzo obviously very highly rates Lane Thomas, uh, and I don't think like the expectations and the reality is necessarily gonna line up on what they would want in order to move these guys. I'm sure you know they've looked at all these contending teams and they're looking at, okay, what names do we need to say yes? And I don't know. I'm not very confident that they're gonna get those names uh, that they'd want from these organizations. Maybe I'm wrong. Uh, but it just I don't think like I think there's some disconnect there.
Right. Kyle Finnegan, I expect not a top 100 prospect, but a top 15 prospect in a system
Oh yeah,
kind of
easily. Yeah,
situation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you
You
can
know,
get like
you might be able to get a top 10,
you'll get
maybe.
a major league piece if that's what you want. You'd probably get a lower you'd get Kyle Finnegan but younger essentially.
Right.
Which I mean, to a contender, they are probably looking at Finnegan as like a setup guy. Uh, or maybe like they're a six inning guy. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I think, like I said, I think the way we value the Nats, and this isn't just like Nats fans in general. It's just baseball. Is the fans overvalue their players, and I'm sure the front offices overvalue some of their players too. Uh, yeah, I don't know.
And the
It's
other good.
I was just gonna say, I think just in general, like a lot of these guys who have that extra year of control, it's gonna be hard for the Nats to kind of get what they want for them. I mean, unless we're talking about Hunter Harvey, which I think Hunter Harvey, you could get a haul for him right now.
Right. I mean, the other one that I think is really interesting to me is Lane Thomas, right?
Hmm.
Because he's a guy that has the ability to play like an everyday outfielder, right? But does he fit into the future for the Nationals is a question that I've been tumbling with, right? You talk about a Nationals outfield with James Wood, with Dylan Cruz, with Jacob Young at center, maybe, the way he's been playing. Uh, there's not a lot of room for a guy like Lane Thomas. And regardless of how he's been playing, I think they should trade him this deadline. And I don't know. I feel like they could get a good amount. I don't know what the Nats consensus is on him because they held on to him last deadline, which I thought was the right decision to hold on to him then. But I just don't see how he fits into the long term future of the Nationals with this steady stream of outfielders coming up uh, out of this farm system right now.
Yeah, I mean, it really it kind of boils down to their internal timelines on some of these prospects. Uh, my running theory is we see James Wood second half of August, and then you see Dylan Cruz uh, probably after the like the ARB deadline where they get that extra year in 2025 is probably their internal timeline on these guys. And I mean, it really the question kind of does boil down to, do you see Jacob Young maintaining his defensive production?
Right.
Because I mean, not to draw parallels or anything, but there once was a really great defensive outfielder who had not a great offensive season, but was had a really respectable offensive season. Uh, and then he went on to become one of the most hated players uh, on the Nats, roster in recent memory. And of course, I'm talking about Victor Robles. Uh,
I feel like hate's a strong word, but
hated. There was a lot of hate thrown his direction. Let's not lie. All right. Obviously we're not. I'm not saying the angry people we see on social media are the represent the entirety of the Nets fan base. But I mean, there was a lot of hate thrown his way. Uh, some deserved, some undeserved. Uh, I don't know if you think Jacob Young is this defensive guy and he's going to maintain this defensive ability. Then yeah. He's a everyday player, because he's the best center fielder in baseball, defensively. If you think he's even remotely this good, long term, then yeah, keep him. If you don't think he's going to kind of age out of this, which I mean he's 24, it's possible that he ages out of it. Uh, I'd say keep him, even if like his bat trends down a little bit more. He's the most valuable national right now. I think he's having a better season than CJ Abrams, but also CJ Abrams is like one of the worst defenders in baseball by advanced metrics. So it's two sides of the coin, I guess. Yeah, I mean it really does come down to Jacob Young though. With
But
what you do
even
is the Lane Thomas question. That and it's uh, are we gonna go get Juan Soto or not? Like, are we gonna make a competitive offer to Soto? If we're gonna make a competitive offer to him, then okay, cool, let's trade Lane. Yeah, no biggie. But I don't see. I mean, like I said, if both those boxes or one of those boxes aren't checked, then Lane is going to be a nat on August 1st.
But here's the thing. Even and I get what you're saying here, but even if we don't make that competitive offer to Soto, and even if Jacob Young his defense kind of goes down a little bit, you have guys that can kind of play that role, right? You have Stone Garrett in the system, and I know he hasn't been as good as he was last year, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
been struggling in the minors,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's still the kind of guy that Lane Thomas is great, but I don't think I don't think there's a reason to hold on to him this deadline. Regardless, I just think there's enough outfield depth in the system that they can replace him, even if Jacob Young goes down the path of a Victor Robles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's you're gonna probably have to sign somebody uh this offseason, uh if you do trade Lane, just because I don't know. I'm out on Robert Hassel the third. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't. I'm not penciling him into the outfield picture. I'm not penciling in Elijah Green. I'm not penciling in Jeremy De La Rosa, uh, or Stone Garrett, or Travis Blankenhorn, or any of those guys who are down on AAA. Because it's just I don't think. I mean, if you don't offer on Soto, then who's the best like the next alternative? Because you need somebody to play in the outfield. Uh, I mean, you go get Teoscar Hernandez. Do you just ride it out with Jacob Young? And I don't know.
It's a tough
There's
it's a tough
yeah
discussion because there are these overlapping factors and we don't really know what's going to happen there. But it's one of those things that I feel like you're going to get more value from a trade of Lane Thomas than you are of holding on to him for the future. And maybe I'm digging my grave up on this hill a little too quickly. But
I mean, I agree with the sentiment. It's just like it's I think the long-term plan is gonna have more of a say than the offers that they receive, if that makes sense.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. We'll see what kind of offers they receive. It's going to be an interesting deadline, not just for the Nats, but for everyone in the NL. And we'll talk about that in rounding third, actually, coming up after this. Um, but there's it's gonna be really interesting next couple months for the Nationals. Lots of stuff to keep an eye on as players get healthy and we get closer to the deadline. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we close out our show here today, Hayden?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question to you is who is the most surefire Nat to get traded outside of Jesse Winker?
I would say Lane Thomas, honestly.
Okay.
I don't see him in a Nationals uniform in August.
Okay.
Um, and that's one of those. I mean, you could make the argument maybe a guy like I don't know Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey probably gets traded. Um, but I don't know what kind of return you get on those bullpen guys that probably aren't going to be closers on contenders, right?
Hmm.
It's not going to be this huge return. But I think Lane Thomas is going to fetch the biggest value outside of Jesse Winker, and I think it's going to be enough to pull the trigger.
Yeah. I think it's Dylan Floro. You know, he's 1 year. He's a rental, having a really good season. Um, yeah. No, that'll be interesting for sure.
But yeah, we'll see. But yes, thank you everybody so much for tuning into the Clubhouse here with the Nats Report. We have been your hosts, Jeremy Lapidus, and
Haden Raymer.
thank you so much. We'll be back next week talking more Nationals. Uh, remember to go check out the Nats Report. New stuff coming out every day. The morning briefing, all this stuff on the minors. Everything you want to know about the Nationals is there. So go check it out. It's absolutely worth it. And yeah, uh, coming up next, we're gonna do a broader baseball. Talk about everything that is not just the Nationals, everything in the MLB. So
It's a
tune
lot.
in just a couple minutes for that. Uh, it'll be a good show. But thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you